Awiz, and today we're reacting to the scariest thing on Soviet TV by NFKRZ. So if you're new to the channel, my name is The Lost Owen. Ooh, no. So if you're new to the channel, my name is Star Sign, and on this channel right here, I basically have two channels, and on this channel right here, so if you're new to the channel, my name is Star Sign, and basically on this channel right here, I basically react to anything that's media, TV, and movies. And I'll be honest with you, I've never really thought about Soviet TV. It's never been something like, oh wait, let's watch some old clips from Soviet TV. I've just never conceptualized it. But hey, here we are now. So without further ado.
Television in the Soviet Union was very different to what we're used to today. The average Soviet citizen back in the day couldn't really sit there and sift through tons of channels on his remote, because you only had like 2 to 4 TV channels to choose from, depending on the time and where you were exactly in the Union. But nevertheless, a lot of people still have nostalgia for the Soviet TV. A lot of people have very fond memories of the music that would be played on Soviet TV, on all the concerts that took place and everything. Soviet movies, of course, are a very big part of everybody's nostalgia. There were a lot of comedies, romantic movies, crime thrillers, and so on. And even the Soviet news, even though they were obviously propaganda, a lot of people even have nostalgia for them, because the Soviet propaganda didn't quite stoop to the levels that are as low as modern Russian propaganda. So even the way the news presenters spoke is nostalgic to people. However, I have a question to you. What do you
Wait, how bad is Russian propaganda for the Soviet Union? The Soviet Union to be considered watered down. What? How bad is the propaganda there? Like what?
think was the scariest thing you could ever see on Soviet television? No, it's not Soviet horror movies, those barely existed. No, it wasn't news about war or something, because they barely showed those back in the day. No, the scariest thing you would ever see on Soviet television is actually this. Yes, people, that is correct. The Swan Lake Ballet by Pyotr Tchaikovsky was actually the scariest thing on Soviet TV. Because when the Swan Lake was playing on the TV, you knew that something in the country is going horribly wrong. And it could either mean that the leader of the country has just died, and there's a massive power struggle going on, or sometimes that actually meant that your country is coming to an end. Because in 1991, when the Soviet Union was falling apart, instead of updating the citizens about what is going on, the Soviet TV ran the Swan Lake for 3 days in a row. Why Swan Lake, and how did this even happen? Hey there people, it is your boy Roman, your favorite neighborhood Russian, and in today's video, we're gonna be talking about the one thing that you did not want to see on Soviet TV. And also talk about why the Swan Lake playing on the TV is actually still relevant in modern Russia under Vladimir Putin. So, the first ever time that the Swan Lake...
But that's, okay, wait, before he carries on with the explanation of what's going on, that's kind of crazy that, of course, the Soviet Union and any other dictatorship, they don't want you to know when bad things are happening in the country. They always want to make the country seem like it's a good thing, and if they cannot cover it up, they'll just blame it on another country, on another place. And sometimes, yes, that could be the actual truth. Sometimes, well, other countries are assholes to other countries. That's just how it is, right? But it's interesting that, like, they would, like, everyone knew, as from what I'm hearing, everyone knew that, hey, if they're playing Swan, this Swan Dangasa, bruh, it's bad time though. It's cooked. We cooked. We cooked. We cooked. Because they can't tell us anything bad. So we cooked. Something bad's about to happen.
Lake Ballet was shown on Soviet TV as a sign of something bad was on the 10th November of 1982 when the great Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev passed away. In the USSR, the 10th of November was actually the day of the Soviet police. And every single year you would see a special concert on the TV devoted to this celebration. However, in 1982 the concert was cancelled, and instead, a recording of the Swan Lake Ballet was shown on the TV instead. And this is basically what started this great tradition. The Soviet Union was a country where the figure of the leader... Да, блять, у меня какая-то муха летает, она сейчас села на... Сука, я эту муху сейчас, блять, убью нахуй, она заебала меня. Я ее не убью, потому что она, блять, так и будет летать. Ну что поделать, она, блять, просто села на линзу часов. Еще разок. Now in the Soviet Union...
Damn, bro. Damn. I knew it was getting crazy when he said suka, but I was like, yo, what did the fly do? But wasn't that bad, bro? Joe.
Union, the figure of the leader and the head of the country has always been very important. Joseph Stalin was really the first to create a real cult of personality around himself, and a lot of the leaders after him followed in his footsteps. For example, Leonid Brezhnev, who was basically the head of the country for almost 20 years. During Brezhnev's reign, the country was in a so-called era of stagnation. And it's a... Да, блять, эта муха охуела, блять. Это пиздец,
yeah, what the
It was a time in which the Soviet Union wasn't developing quite as rapidly as in the times of Stalin, for example. And there were a lot of issues like the lack of consumer goods and some food products. But it's actually a time that a lot of Soviet people remember with fondness, as a time of certain stability and normalcy. And Brezhnev being in power for so long, of course, also had kind of a code of personality, and when he died, they basically did not know what to say on television. So instead of talking about it, they simply aired the Swan Lake Ballet by Pyotr Tchaikovsky. Now, the significance of the Swan Lake is that it's obviously one of the
Classic
best-known
80s.
ballets that were created by, one of Russia's biggest composers.
We're not going to talk about our problems, just going to distract ourselves. Why did I use a Russian accent when I did that? Okay, that was childish. Okay.
Tchaikovsky, who was also gay, by the way, that's a fun fact that Russia does not want to mention ever. And the Swan Lake has always been the favorite ballet of the Soviet officials. And whenever some kind of foreign guest would usually come into the country, the entire Soviet elite would usually gather in the Grand Kremlin Palace to watch the Swan Lake performance. Swan Lake is not the happiest sounding ballet ever, right? And even though basically through word of mouth, the people in the Soviet Union did find out pretty quickly that Brezhnev has died, the ballet playing on the TV created a real dark and really depressing atmosphere, and a feeling of real impending doom. I mean, my dad, for example, actually told me this story. He remembers the day when Brezhnev died very well. He was like a teenage boy in school at the time, and he told me that day he got a knock on his door from a friend who looked very concerned and worried, and my dad asked why, and the kid told him, look, you heard what happened? Brezhnev is dead. Now we're surely going to have a nuclear war with America. So yeah, a lot of people felt pretty worried, and the fact that they only showed this on the TV made the entire thing very memorable.
Yeah.
And what's quite funny is that after this, the tradition continued. After Brezhnev's death, Yuri Andropov became the new leader of the Soviet Union, but unfortunately he did not lead the country for very long, because he became the country's leader at the young, ripe age of 68. And basically less than a year after coming into power, Andropov died. And guess what, guys? Once again, they did not...
Oh, hold about that is young. Have you seen the American presidents? You know how old those Okies are, bro? Like 80s, freaking 70s, bro. So yeah, that was very young. That was very young. But hey, maybe it wasn't young for Soviet time. Who knows?
Know what to show on the TV, so they simply just ran the Swan Lake on all the channels. Surely this is not going to happen again, you guys, right? Well, guess what? It did, because the next leader of the Soviet Union, Konstantin Chernenko, also did not spend a very long time as the leader of the country. He also became the leader at the ripe age of 73 years old. And also, less than 1 year into running the country, he died. And once again, this time basically continuing the great tradition, on the day of his death, the Soviet TV once again only showed the Swan Lake Ballet. So yes, even though these three great airings of the Swan Lake set the tone, the one that really made the mark and became the most famous was actually when the Soviet Union was falling apart in 1991. In particular, I'm talking about the 1991 coup attempt in the Soviet Union. I'm not gonna give you the whole story of the dissolution of the Soviet Union in this video, but basically, to put it short, the last leader of the Soviet Union, Gorbachev, has made a lot of reforms, opening up the country and creating more free speech, which basically actually started leading to the Soviet Union falling apart. A lot of republics in the Soviet Union decided that they now want to leave, the country was falling apart at the seams, and at the end of August of 1999, when Gorbachev was actually outside of Moscow spending some private time at his residence, several members of the Soviet government, as part of the so-called State Committee on the State of Emergency, announced on TV that they're actually about to take control of the country, because Gorbachev has led the Soviet Union to the point of ruin. The people who attempted the coup were Communist Party hardliners that opposed a lot of the liberal reforms of Gorbachev. And essentially what happened is that for 3 to 5 days, the country was in a complete state of lawlessness. These Communist hardliners actually sent tons of troops and tanks into Moscow, other several big cities in Russia, and also other big cities in the Soviet Union. But also at the same time, there were huge protests organized by the people and also other members of the government that disagreed with the coup. In Moscow, for example, hundreds of thousands of people gathered, essentially trying to defend democracy. And also the Russians that were protesting against this coup had started building barricades around Moscow's White House, which was the parliament of the Soviet Union. The protesters were also basically led by Boris Yeltsin, who later became the president of Russia. And yes, for these 3 to 5 days, you had a feeling of complete lawlessness and also possibility of a brewing civil civil war in the country, because the Soviet troops deployed in Moscow were actually preparing to storm the so-called White House, the Soviet Parliament building. And yes, people, among all this craziness, right, if you were a regular Soviet citizen and you wanted to see what is going on in your country, and you turned on the TV, guess what you would see? Yes, you would see the Swan Lake, which has been playing at the time of this August coup for 3 entire days in a row. Just imagine living in a country and hearing somewhere that there's some crazy shit going on, somebody's trying to undertake a coup and remove the country's leader from power, right? You're hearing information that the country is literally on the brink of a civil war breaking out, and there was no internet back in the day, right? So your only way to learn anything would be to turn on the TV and listen to the news, and guess what? The only thing you heard when you turned on the TV was
bro, it's like the world is burning. The world is burning. Future me, look into my eyes. The world is burning. Is it copyright? If the song not copyrighted, play the music, future me. The world is burning. Yeah, the whole time. Crazy. That would just be crazy in my opinion.
Like, that is fucking insane. The fact that the Swan Lake has already been associated for the Soviet people with a feeling of something bad happening, this kind of impending doom coming towards us, right? I really imagine that the Swan Lake airing on the TV in these crazy days did not really work well for a lot of Soviet people's mental health. Now, what's quite funny, by the way, is that 2 years later, when there was another coup yet again, now orchestrated by the Russian president Boris Yeltsin, I actually have a full-on video about this. It's called The Day Russian Democracy Died. It's a pretty good one. During that time, when there were tanks and troops on the streets of Moscow, and troops were also once again preparing to storm the White House building, and there were tanks actually shooting at the Parliament building in Moscow, right? That time, there was already no Swan Lake anymore, so progress, I guess. But that is the difference between Russia and the Soviet Union, I guess. You know, it's just the exact same bullshit is going on, except now you get to finally see it on the screen, I guess. Very nice. So yes, even though this was a huge phenomenon, the last time they actually aired the Swan Lake on Russian and Soviet TV was 1991. I mean, they do air it as part of, like, you know, as a ballet, right? As a part of regular scheduled programming. They no longer do it at the time when there's some bullshit happening in the country, right? However, the Swan Lake actually still stays in the public memory of everybody in Russia and the Soviet Union, and is actually still relevant today in Putin's Russia. Now, if you guys have been keeping up with what's going on in Russia, if you watch my channel, for example, you know that in modern Russia, if you're an artist, a celebrity, whatever, you basically cannot speak out publicly against the war in Ukraine, or you're pretty much either gonna be jailed, or you're gonna be kicked out of the country, or you're gonna lose the ability to perform your music or whatever whatsoever. You're gonna be blacklisted from TV and everything, right? That's the best case scenario, by the way, if they simply just take away your entire livelihoods, instead of sending you to prison, right? However, despite this, a lot of Russian artists that actually care to speak out are still doing it despite the threat of persecution. For example, the artist Noise MC. He's a pretty famous rock and rap artist in Russia who's actually spoken out against the war in Ukraine, and he's pretty much like blacklisted now in Russia. He's considered like a wanted felon and everything. He no longer lives in Russia.
I'm sure like what's rock is very like popular in Russia, because last I hear they had a lot of biker gangs in there, bro. So I'm pretty sure rock is very heavy. But you know, I'm not quite sure. I don't know the music scene in Russia. I mean, why would I know the music scene in Russia? But you get what I'm saying.
Right, because he had to leave. Well, this artist, Noise MC, has recently kind of once again made the Swan Lake relevant again in Russia. 2 years ago, he released this song right here called Коопerativ Лебединое озеро, which means Cooperative Swan Lake, which is like a pretty popular anti-war song in Russia now. The name of the song is kind of like a double entendre or whatever, play on words. The reason why the song is called Cooperative Swan Lake is because Vladimir Putin basically had a group of friends back in the day, and together Vladimir Putin and his friends created like a business group, or like a small organization or something called Ozero, which literally means lake in Russian. And if you know a thing or two about corruption in Russia, basically, a lot of Russia's like oligarchs, billionaires, the richest people in Russia happen to be close childhood friends of Vladimir Putin, who are also part of this exact, you know, cooperative lake, right? And it's like a common thing for anti-Putin people to say that Russia is being ran by like a criminal organization by this cooperative called Lake. And the song is called Cooperative Swan Lake, right? And the chorus of the song actually has these lyrics. I want to watch the ballet, let the swans dance. Let the grandpa tremble in fear for his so-called lake. Get away from the screen, Solovyov. I want to see the swans dance. Now, there's also a double entendre here because Vladimir Solovyov is like one of Russia's biggest propaganda pundits. His last name, Solovyov, comes from the Russian word Solovey, which is also a name for a bird, nightingale. So here he's essentially saying, remove the nightingales from the screen, we need to see the swans dancing. And then after, there's the spot where Noise MC actually sings the melody from the Swan Lake. So it's like... So it's like a Swan Lake melody, but in more...
Okay, that's cool. I ain't gonna lie, that's kind of cool. That's kind of cool, especially with that whole wordplay. Like, okay, basically we hate the propaganda and we just want the freaking truth. Show us the truth. Stop lying to us. We tired of lies, bruh. I think that's what the music is saying. You know what I'm saying?
Of a, punk allure. So yeah, the point of the song basically is that he's saying that he wants to see the swans dance on the TV once again, which basically means that he wants to see Vladimir Putin dead. That's the idea, right?
What?
That Vladimir Putin at this point is comparable to like Soviet leaders. I mean, he's literally been in power longer than Leonid Brezhnev.
Well, hold up, wait, what? Wait, no, wait. I do not advocate for that. I do not advocate for any type of violence on anybody. Wow, I should learn to shut up more. I shouldn't, yeah.
Now, so you might as well just play the Swan Lake when Vladimir Putin dies on the TV, right? And that's exactly what the song here is saying. Noise MC once again wants to see the Swan Lake played on Russian TV. And the song went viral and recently only kind of became relevant again because you may have heard about this, but recently in Russia there's been a wave of street music protests, if you will, right? Where young Russians started performing songs by banned artists that are like now exiled from Russia, considered foreign agents and so on the streets of large cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg, basically as a kind of a form of protest once again, because even singing these songs these days is kind of like outlawed and prohibited, right? Because these songs are like banned and extremist, right? And the busker band that performed these songs on the street in Russia called Stop.
I mean, they want a world leader, so yeah.
Time actually went viral together with their lead singer Naoka. She's literally a very young girl, an 18-year-old singer from Russia who showed herself to be like more brave than 99% of the people. The videos of them performing these band songs in public actually started going viral, and one of the songs that they actually performed a lot was this song by Noise MC about the Swan Lake. There's even a video of like young Russians on the streets singing the song and screaming that they want to see the Swan Lake again, and screaming da, 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 da. And that right there was actually pretty much the straw that broke the camel's back, because right after this, the band stopped time and the singer Naoka actually got immediately arrested, and they spent quite a few weeks in prison. I have actually a video about this as well. I talked about this whole situation a few months ago, but right now Naoka and the Stop Time band actually already left Russia because they were potentially facing a real criminal case for simply singing songs in public. Yes, Russia is a country that is not threatened by anything and is standing strong. It is so strong, in fact, that even 18-year-old girls singing songs in the street are threatened to the country's security. Okay, bro. But yes, this entire situation basically shows that the Swan Lake and the idea of the Swan Lake being shown on the TV, even though the last time that it ever happened was in 1991, that was like way before I was born even, right? It is still something that is relevant to Russia of today. And even a lot of the young Russians today, a lot of them who were born, after the fall of the Soviet Union, right? A lot of them even after the year 2000s, even though these children have never seen the Swan Lake on the TV, they still know what the whole thing is about, and it's still relevant to them, because now they can say that, well, we wouldn't mind seeing the Swan Lake on the TV either, because because we're kind of tired of our glorious leader that has been, being the glorious leader for the past 25 years now. So yeah, I think it's quite amazing, and it's quite sad also, right, that this symbol of the lack of free speech and a sort of ridiculous authoritarianism and, lack of free information and so on, that started back in the Soviet Union, this symbol of the cult of personality in a way even, right, that it's still relevant to Russia today. Myself as a Russian who was born in 1998 after the fall of the Soviet Union, I expected something.
Yeah, so basically Russia did not change, it just got rebranded. That's what I think that's what they're trying to say. Which, yeah, but it's crazy that like now that this basically the show or the song or whatever became something that was very like, I guess, a telltale, a sign, you know what I'm saying, of the end of a leader, and now people want him out so badly in his country that, well, ish, bruh, they literally sing songs about him, basically. Like, that's how much it is. And I understand what the member is saying. Like, yo, is it really that safe? What is that? Okay, is it really that, I'm sorry, I was getting distracted. Is it really that safe here? Is it really that secure, the country where you're getting threatened by kids? But I could also say that, hey, yo, bro, a lot of revolutions were started by kids. A lot of revolutions were started by kids. One of the most famous revolution was the American Revolution, right? And also the most recent revolution was the Gen Z revolutions. Not even revolution, revolutions. So yes, I understand what he's saying. It's like, yo, okay, wait, how are you being threatened by kids? But it's like, well, shit, who starts the most revolutions? You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's a bit interesting. I don't want to get into that because, like, I don't understand Russian politics. I'll be honest with you, so I'm not going to really comment on that part, but that's what I'm about to say. What do y'all think? So thank you for watching the rest of the video. Thank you for chilling with your own. Comment, like, subscribe. Let's start. And we out. Yeah, we out. Shit. I was like, wait, what was my line again?